How about another hand for our wonderful 10-minute service speaker tonight? I've, of course, been thinking of lots of stuff to say over the last 3 weeks since Freedom asked me. One of the things that I thought is that if you wanted to torture somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous, go to the monthly HCI meeting and volunteer to be the speaker seeker, and then find this guy that you hate and ask him if he'd like to be the speaker at the next meeting, and then wait until the night before and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I already asked this other guy. Can you do it next month?" And then just keep doing that until they come up and apologize. So, almost exactly 25 years ago, I was 2 weeks sober, and I was at the 202 Club in Pasadena, and they sang happy birthday to me because they thought it was funny that I was turning 21 in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I haven't had to pick up a drink since then, but I reset my sobriety date because I smoked pot for a year. So at about 18 and a half years, I hadn't been to meetings in a long time, and I'd been in Humboldt County a long time, and I started thinking that I needed to treat my anxiety with some weed. And so I smoked pot for a year. And then had a real powerful spiritual experience. It lasted a few weeks and ended up coming back into Alcoholics Anonymous. That was the main thing one of the main things that came out of that spiritual experience was that I was supposed to find my greatest good, my highest purpose, and that is Alcoholics Anonymous. And that first meeting that I was at the Presbyterian church there I'm pretty sure it was the Monday night. Yeah, it had to be, because that was the only one that used to be there. At the Monday night beginners meeting, and they were handing out chips and stuff. And not until that moment had I even considered that I had relapsed. Like that whole time, that whole year that I smoked pot and everything, I was treating my anxiety. And I was praying to God, like, please don't let me drink, as I was sparking up the joint. And but as I was sitting there and they were passing out chips or asking for anybody in their first 30 days, suddenly the thought came to me like, oh shit, am I a newcomer? And I went, fuck no, man, I don't want to be a fucking newcomer, And then the next thought that came to me was the only reason that I would not take a chip was ego. And so I stood up and I took a chip, and I took a newcomer chip for 30 days at every meeting that asked for newcomers. And I took a 30-day chip for 30 days at every meeting that asked for people who had 30 days and 60 days. And every time, people are like, oh, good job, man, keep coming back. And I'm like... But I did it because I don't think that both of those things are important, and that's why I'm telling you both of those things. That I haven't had to have a drink since June 2nd of 1993, even when I smoked pot for a year. Like, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. That's important, but also it's important for me not to claim that 25 years. That, my new sobriety date is April 9th, 2013. And because, I don't know. One of the things that I heard on a speaker tape not too long ago that I really liked was that if you take a cake or a chip or something, that you have to put the amount of your sobriety in the basket when it comes around. And I thought that since I'll be, or have, and probably will mention again that I haven't had to have a drink in 25 years, I had to leave my wallet out in my car, but really. But the first chance I get, I'll put that 25. And I think that's only fair, that if you get the privilege of, looking all cool to, tell people how much time you got, that you should put that amount of money in the basket. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but I've been trying to train you all for these last 5 years, and every time somebody says, when they ask for birthdays in the month of June, and anybody who comes up and says, I will have such and such amount of time on the 24th, I never clap. And so what I'm hoping is that you'll learn eventually that I don't approve. And then you'll start to say things like, I really liked what Roger said tonight. He said, by the grace of God, I'll have. I think that's just about right. Because I don't think it's consistent with the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous to say, I will have. I don't think that's the truth about alcoholism. I can't tell you what I'll have. I can't tell you that I'll be sober tomorrow morning. I have a disease that includes a mental illness where at certain moments I'm strangely insane. I'm crazy. And it does not matter that I will have such and such amount of time on, a certain date, and that I stood up and told the whole room. Doesn't matter because it's sunny, or it's raining, or she called, or she didn't call, or I lost the job, or I found the job, or it's a shitty day, or it's a great day. By the way, I'll probably be cussing up here. Again, I don't think it's consistent with the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous to come up here and pretend I'm church folk. I did debate wearing my onesie instead of my suit, and if I would have worn my onesie, I would not have cussed. But since I did wear the suit, I think it's only right that I cuss. Because I'm really talking to the newcomer. And that newcomer needs to hear me say fucking shit and fucking asshole. And I heard one guy, Justin, share that he asked a guy to be a sponsor because he heard him say he was in line at the supermarket and couldn't stop thinking about grabbing a lighter and setting the lady's hair on fire that was in front of him. I need to say that kind of stuff so that the newcomer sitting there doesn't think that I'm not like him, because I am like you. Even though I'm in a suit and I clean up nice and I haven't had to have a drink in a long time and I have a nice, serene, stable, healthy existence, I am like you. And I have thoughts like that even now. So I guess I'd really just like to talk about alcoholism. I was asked to speak a few years ago at the New Hope Fellowship and made the mistake of talking about myself a lot. Like, I thought for some reason that an hour was a long time, and I thought, well, I have some interesting stories, and I'll share all these crazy stories from my teenage years and stuff. And I ended up spending 3/4 of the time on what it was like. And I'm just, even though I have some fun, interesting stories, they're just not as interesting as the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so, I've probably already said enough for you to identify and know that I'm a crazy alcoholic. But as I talk about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'll just interweave a little of my story into that. So, why are we here? Like, what's this all about? What is Alcoholics Anonymous? What's the point? It says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that its main object is to get me in touch with a power greater than myself that will solve my problem. The problem I have is twofold, actually threefold. So one is the mental obsession. I talked about that even though when I came in, I had grave reasons not to drink, and I did not want to drink. And in every fiber of my being, I knew that I was overlooking a cliff and it was about to get really shitty and I did not want to go down that cliff. And I had found AA, and I loved AA, and I was going to a bunch of meetings, and I was reading the big book, and I was talking to people. And even so, at 2 weeks, I'm sitting in my recliner in the living room and hadn't had a thought of drinking all day, didn't want to drink. And I looked up at the clock and it said 10:46, and this thought came out of nowhere that the liquor store with the porno movies closed at 11. And I was off. No defense at certain moments. Not all the time, but at certain moments, I am not going to pull out my phone list. I am not going to play the tape all the way through. I'm not going to, I'm not present. I'm just a host for something else that is using me to feed itself, and I'm along for the ride. So I relapsed then after 2 weeks, and then a week later I relapsed again after they had picked me up on the warrant for my DUI. I had gotten a DUI for going the wrong way on Huntington Drive in South Pasadena, which, if anybody is familiar with Huntington Drive, it's basically a freeway. And I wasn't even that drunk. Like, I remember the whole thing, and there were many other nights when I don't remember anything, and I just wake up and, look for my car and have like a vague recollection of driving over the median or doing figure eights in some chick's yard. So I didn't remember that. She told me that afterwards. So they picked me up on the warrant for that, and I went to jail for that for 24 hours, and they let me out on my own recognizance. And all I could think of the whole time I was in jail was to pick up a 12-pack. And as soon as they let me out, I called my friend Sergio, as if I was 16 again, as if there were no problems and no reasons not to drink, and that I hadn't been calling suicide hotlines just a few weeks prior, and that I wasn't thinking crazy shit that was going to get me in prison and hurt some people, and I was a blackout drinker, and it was going to make it all possible. I knew that if I kept on, I was going to end up waking up in prison and not know what I did or who I hurt, because it was stuck in that rut, and it was just over and over and over and over, and I hated myself, and so I was just basically drinking and sleeping, and I switched to cheap vodka because it was cheaper and quicker to get there, and I'd just drink until I could pass out and then wake up and drink some more. And so even though I had all these grave reasons and everything, and even though I just went to jail because of alcoholism, it was like, oh yeah, man, let's go hang out. Let's go get a 12-pack. And so came in again, raising my hand as a newcomer again, sitting in the 202 Club. And I'm sitting there thinking about all this stuff that I've been reading about the strange mental twist, and that at certain moments my willpower would prove meaningless, that it wouldn't come to mind, that all my intelligence and willpower that I displayed in respect to other matters would not even come into play. And I suddenly had the thought, and this was my moment of clarity. This is when, paradoxically, I began to have hope in Alcoholics Anonymous. This was when that punch of hopelessness landed squarely on my chin. I realized that I hadn't been choosing to drink in years, that I was drinking because I had to drink, and that there was nothing I could do about it. And it was just like, fuck. It was the most terrifying moment I had ever had. And I just screamed out, help me. The other thing that I had been reading about and learning about was that there was supposedly this power out there that would help me if I was willing. And that if I did certain things, there was a room full of people that said that power was why they were there. So I reached out to that power, and I became willing to do whatever it took. And I stopped fucking around. I stopped doing it my way. I stopped picking and choosing what I wanted to do and thinking that I was going to do this and I'll do that and I'll go to AA and I'll go back to school and I'll get my shit together and I just gave up, and I just realized, like, fuck, I don't know what to do. There's nothing I can do. I'm fucked. I need something to protect me from this thing. And so I got myself a sponsor, and I really worked the steps. I didn't just talk about them and try and sound good in meetings. I did everything I could to gain access to this power that the book and that the room had told me was what I needed to protect me in those moments. That in those moments, my willpower was not going to protect me, and I needed something else to protect me from it. And so I did my 4th and 5th step at 30 days. When I finished my 5th step, it was like I was going to float out of the room. I felt the same as everybody else for the first time ever. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't cocky. I was just like at peace, true peace, through every fiber of my being. And that's when the obsession to drink left. Because why am I going to obsess about something that's not as good at taking away the hurt as this thing was? And so the obsession to drink hasn't come back since then. So that was probably like July 2nd of 1993. I mean, that's amazing. As it says in the book, the age of miracles is still with us. So, so I became willing to do whatever it took. So I think I'd like to just kind of go through the steps for the rest of my time and share some of what I've learned and what I've found. And this is just my journey, my opinion, my experience, my take on things. I'm not the authority. I'm not president of Alcoholics Anonymous. I hopefully everything I say, my goal is that everything I say, I would be able, if pressed, to show you in the book where it comes from. Because I believe the book is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's what worked. They wrote down what worked. It was the first thing that ever worked. They just used to lock us up. For real alcoholics, I was thinking about this earlier, that Alcoholics Anonymous is for alcoholics. And so, yes, there are other things that help people that have a problem with alcohol. All sorts of other things. And some of them work wonderfully. But Alcoholics Anonymous is for the guy who tried or knows if he tried all those other things that it wouldn't work. So we're not in competition with anybody. We're the last house on the block. And working the steps and really doing the deal is the last room in the last house on the block. And literally, it's like our hats are off to you. If you can find anything else that works, no sarcasm, our hats are off to you. Like we would too. I would too. So it's not so like, self-helpy stuff and whatever, all the other things. If somebody can do something like that and get sober or control it or moderate it or just stay out of jail and be okay with that or whatever, then cool. Like, that's awesome. But they're not an alcoholic by the definition of alcoholic that Alcoholics Anonymous has. Because by the very definition of alcoholic in Alcoholics Anonymous, it means I don't have the power not to drink. I'm powerless. I'm crazy at certain moments and I will drink again. Oh, and so the second part of alcoholism is that I have this physical allergy or abnormal physical reaction that once I put alcohol in me, I have to have more. I don't react the same as a non-alcoholic person physically. I'm wired differently than a non-alcoholic. And this is talked about in the big book in the doctor's opinion, and the reason he called it the doctor's opinion at that time is because it hadn't been proven and he didn't want to be disbarred by writing about it. The people who wrote the book asked him to contribute because they wanted to lend credibility to the book, and he was a specialist treating alcoholics, had been for many, many years, tried to help thousands and thousands and thousands of alcoholics. And so he agreed and he wrote it, but he said, I'm going to call it the doctor's opinion because none of this has been proven. Later on, it was proven, and that's when, alcoholism was classified as a disease because they saw scientifically that I don't have a sufficient number of enzymes to process alcohol the same way as a non-alcoholic person, and because of that, it lingers in this acetonic state and creates these crazy levels of acetone, and that's that phenomenon of craving. That's that thing that once I put it in me that I have to have more. I'm not choosing to drink 24 bottles of beer. I couldn't drink 24 bottles of water. But a non-alcoholic, they're like that. not trying to drink 24 bottles of beer. Like, what? I've had 4 and like, that's it. Like, I'm starting to feel it, and they don't have that same physical reaction. And so because of that, once I start, I can't stop, and it's progressive, and it gets me in its grip, and like I'm just along for the ride physically then, and might not be able to get off that physical allergy, abnormal physical reaction train again, right? Once I'm on it, there might not be any more stops left for me. So that's the second part. And so this, and it says that really what my problem is that I have a spiritual malady. And so all that stuff is well and good, and it's true. All the stuff about the physical allergy and the sufficient number of enzymes, all that stuff is true. I mean, it's provable, right? I mean, you can measure that stuff. But I think all that is just and this is just my take on it, I think all that is just a manifestation, something that's measurable in this realm of the real problem, which is my spiritual malady. Because long before I ever picked up a drink, I had that. I was thinking of killing myself at 5 years old or something. I mean, I did not see how I was going to do this. It was just like, ugh. Like everything just seemed shitty and wrong, and people were mean, and I didn't have any power. I just like couldn't live. It was just like, oh fuck. Just scared to death all the time, and weird and apart from, and just bouncing around like I'm in a pinball machine, just trying to get something to just make me feel okay just for a little bit. And so I stumbled across the first power that I could find, which was the shitty power source, which was lying and cheating and stealing and pretending and trying to get you to like me and creating a stage character and all that stuff. It was the only power that I had ever found. And people told me, oh, you shouldn't lie, and you should be good, and you should treat people nice, and you should do all that. But that didn't work. That didn't make me feel good now. And the shitty power made me feel good now. And so the ultimate shitty power was alcohol. That first time that I drank that, or I drank 11 of the 12 beers in that 12 pack of Meisterbrau and traded the 12th for sharing a joint with a guy, it was like, oh. A speaker that I heard once said, it's like finding the world's greatest headache medicine and then realizing I had had a migraine for 14 years. It was just like, oh, right, I can do this now. I loved alcohol. That was the temporary, illusionary, Georgia, how am I supposed to pronounce that? Illusory? It was a temporary, illusory fix. It temporarily rushed full the hole in the gut and made me be able to pretend that I was okay for as long as it was in there until it all leaked out, and then the hole in the gut was bigger than it was before, and then I needed more of it. That was that. That's the nature of the shitty power. So this is my take on it, right? So it says in the big book, lack of power is my dilemma. So I look at it like I'm just a light bulb, right? Like, of myself I am nothing, the Father within doeth the works, and by the same token, the shitty power within doeth the work as well. Like, it's the same thing. I'm just a light bulb. Like, and it all depends on which power I'm tapped into, and that's going to give me whatever I get. And so, oh man, this is cool. So just the other day, I watched Groundhog Day with a sponsee of mine for the first time in a long time. And I already knew it was a fucking spiritual giant of a movie, and that's the reason I suggested it. But even so, I hadn't seen it in 5 years or something, and I've grown a lot in the last 5 years. And man, it just tore me up. It's just so beautiful. So this guy, he's going to whatever the name of the town, but he's going to where the groundhog is. He's a reporter, and he's real self-centered and an asshole, and sarcastic and stuff, and real just thinking of himself all the time. And he wakes up the next morning after the Groundhog Day, and it's the same day, like again. And then again, and again, and again. Every morning he wakes up and it's like, put your tiny hand in mine. You're gonna, same shit over and over. Same people, same circumstances. And so he goes through this progression where at first he's just kind of confused. And then after a while, he's like, oh, wow, cool. Like, I can pick up on that chick. I can learn everything about her and then talk to her and tell her all this good stuff that I know about her. And then I can get in her pants later. And so he tries that. He, steals the money off the Brink's truck because he can time it exactly like right when the guy turns around just for a moment. He walks by and picks up the money. And so he does that stuff for a while. And then eventually he just gets to like, fuck, like, man, like, let me out of this thing, right? And then he's just like jumping off buildings and killing himself basically. And that just tore me up, man. That moment when he's just falling off the building, just like. So my take on it, again, is just my deal, not AA, although I bet I could find in the book where this is coming from, is that when I came into this world, I had already gone through a bunch of those Groundhog Days. And I was at the point where he, gets the idea to lie to the girl and steal the money off the truck. And he's like, cool. Like, that's where I was just coming into the mix. Like, right away at 14 when I drank that 12-pack of Meisterbräu and I felt that rush of power, I was like, why is everybody telling me to be good? Fuck that. Like, I'm going to do, and that came, there came that rush of power. You don't fucking tell me what to do, bitch. Like, just motherfucker, right? Like, I was defiant because it was just like, now I had power and all this, good stuff that they were trying to get me to do, that didn't fucking work. I was miserable. And now I had a power source and I'm like, all right, it's on, right? So I was like him at that point where he's falling off the buildings and, all that stuff. And so now... so eventually in the movie, he finally surrenders and he starts trying to help people. And he's, catching the little kid falling out of the tree and helping the little old ladies with their car. And he's learning how to play piano and ice sculpt and, doing all this stuff. Just because it needs to be done, just because it's the right thing. And he's not even worried now about it being the same day again and this and that. He's just trying to do the right thing. And of course, that's when everything changes and he meets the girl and he falls in love. And, he moves on to the next day after Groundhog Day. So I think that's where I'm at. During my spiritual experience, I had this is just one of like 97 things, and most of which, if I told you, you'd think I was fucking crazy. So I'm not going to tell you most of them. But one of the things that happened is my house was filled with original pieces of art that I had accumulated over the years. And, every one of them I picked because it spoke to me. Like I had found my voice of like, what do I like? What's, which was... a big deal for me, coming from being a people pleaser and like not even knowing what I thought or what I liked, like just wanting you to like me and like getting my sense of okayness from what you thought of me, And I had recovered from that to where I found my spirit and tried to listen to it. And anyway, so my house was filled with these original pieces of art that my spirit had picked. And one of the things that happened in my spiritual experience is every one of those told a story. And I was like walking around the house like, and like hearing that story. And one of the pictures was of a backyard rodeo. It was a photo negative that this friend of mine had found and then put into Photoshop and, did his artistic thing with. But it was a backyard rodeo and there was a guy on a horse and the horse was fucking up. And then there was a fence, a fence all around the backyard, and there were all these people kind of up on the fence and leaning over the fence watching him, and all those people were my ancestors. I saw each one of them. That they were all these people. And there was a man on a horse in the foreground, and all you saw was his profile, but it was my father. And he was just kind of sitting there on his horse watching this guy on the bucking bronco. And the guy on the bucking bronco was me. And there was this line coming down from the sky, and it was in a noose, and it was around my neck. And the message was, don't get off the fucking horse. Ride this out. And so pretty powerful stuff, right? Where was I going with that? So the spiritual malady. I think that's what's going on for me. I'll just say for me. I don't know what's going on for you. It's possible that you're all just in my movie anyway, right? So I think that's what's going on for me. And that I have this spiritual malady, that I am the prodigal son, right? Like I went all the way out and forsook my father and all that stuff, and now in shame and disgrace, I'm trying to make my way home again. And that's the beautiful, loving thing that the creator of this game board that we're on gave to me, is that the only thing that works is to do the right thing. But I have complete freedom to try everything else. So that I choose the right thing. I choose love. I choose service. I choose to help. I choose it because I don't want the pain of doing it the wrong way anymore. And so the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous is it gave me a recipe on how to tap into that power that all those people in the room at the 202 Club told me they had found, that would keep me sober and start bringing me home. So these principles. And so it's a way of living, right? It says in the big book that we have found a way of living, that genuinely works or something like that. And that's that power. That's what's been lighting my light bulb. And this way of living works. And I know it works because I'm happy. I'm comfortable. I'm not afraid of you. I don't want anything from you. I don't need anything from you. I'm not lying to you so that you'll say this and I'll say that, and then we'll go here, and then this will happen and that'll happen. I'm not running the show. I have this big, bright North Star, and I just look up to it and I try to do what it says. I just try and do the right thing. There are probably 40 times today that this happened in a million little ways. Where I'm like constantly just kind of stopping and checking in and going, all right, well, what's the right thing? And then just trying to do that. Most of the time now, I do a pretty good job at it. Not out of virtue, but out of necessity and fear of pain. But I do a pretty good job at living by the North Star now. But even when I don't, that's not important. It's not important what I do. It's important what I do after what I do. And I have all these tools, all these principles that I just look in the rearview mirror and go, oh, fuck, look what I did. I told her this and this and that, thinking that it was for this, this, and that, but actually it was for this, this, and that. Whoa. All right, well, here, let me do some inventory. Let me write about it. Let me make amends if I've harmed someone. Let me share that with my sponsor. Let me find someone I can help, right? That's the golden key. That's what Chuck Chamberlain calls it. Rigorous self-honesty. That's the whole trick to the whole fucking thing. The golden key, he calls it. Because if I'm honest with myself, and this is what AA gives me the ability, the tools to be honest with myself, I cannot keep going against my conscience. It just hurts too much. So just like early on, my spiritual fitness elevator was so fucking low that I'm thinking of killing myself, coming real close to killing myself, thinking of killing myself, and was probably real close to it. And had to drink. My spiritual fitness elevator was so low that I had to drink, right? And I come into AA and I relapse a couple times and I surrender and I get enough truth or rigorous self-honesty. I have that moment of clarity where I realize I'm not choosing to drink, and that gets me into action and the steps, and I start doing the things that, clear away some of the crap that was blocking the sunlight of the Spirit, and that sunlight of the Spirit came in and started providing me with a defense against the first drink. Just like that whole process led to me growing enough spiritually to not have to drink. Every other character defect and spiritual progress, that I've made since then has worked the same way. As I'm honest with myself, eventually it hurts too much to do it. A great way to explain this, I'm a stutterer, in case you haven't noticed already, but I'm a recovering stutterer too. So a person stutters when they're trying not to stutter. So the thing you would see as me stuttering is me going, like, trying so hard to look all perfect that I'm like, right? And I'm just checked out at that moment. Like, I'm not even here. I'm just like, well, anyway, like I was saying, da, da, da. And so eventually at 32 years old or something, I got so sick and tired of it. I mean, I thought of killing myself over it. It was hell. I mean, just imagine the most intense stage fright in the, like, times 1,000 with everyone I talked to. It was just like, constantly rehearsing what I'm going to say before I go up and talk to somebody, before I go up and order a cup of coffee. I'm like, okay, 1 cafe latte, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like imagining the whole thing and just this intense fear, just terror all the time. And all that happened because I was trying to fix it my way, right? So at some point when I was a little kid or something, like lots of little kids, I started stuttering and talking weird. And for whatever reason, I got it in my head that I shouldn't, and I started trying not to. And that's what led to the whole problem. Whereas other kids were just like, whatever, and then like moved on with their life and went through that little phase. But I probably, because of my self-centeredness and ego and stuff and wanting to be perfect and already tapping into the shitty power of getting my sense of okayness from what you thought of me and all that stuff, I went about it the wrong way. I started trying not to stutter. So that created this whole thing. Anyway, so eventually at 32, I got so sick and tired of this whole thing that I reached out for help, and I sent away to the National Stuttering Foundation of America for all these materials and DVDs of little kids stuttering in the mirror and stuff, and I started really trying to learn about it. And luckily, they had learned about it by this point, because for a long time they didn't know. They would just be like, slow down, But luckily, they had figured out the solution to it. And so the solution to it was to stop lying, to stop pretending that I was a fluent speaker, and stop trying to impress you and just put it out there. Like, stutter if I need to stutter, and look you in the eye and go ahead and stutter and not try and pretend, right? So, but knowing that didn't do shit for me. Like, knowing that, I'm still just terrified and, can know all that and still walk up and go, but what it had me do was start to do things like record myself with the video camera when I was on the phone. And man, that first time was just hell. Like, I'm at work and I'm like, hi, I'm calling about your computer. I was wondering, right? And I'm like watching this and I'm just like, oh, fuck, It hurts so bad. It just destroyed the stage character, right? Like I said, I was checked out in that moment. Like, I wasn't even there. Like, it just felt like something that was magically happening to me that I couldn't do anything about. And the reason I bring all this up is with other character defects, right? Because I know what that's like too, that I just couldn't help but, make fun of her shoes, right? Like, because, you give a couple of neg hits, with the really pretty ones, and then, right? And so, right? And so, right? But there was a point when I wanted to stop doing that, right? But it worked really well. So I would still do it, right? Fuck, right? But I can't use my willpower not to do that, right? I'm spiritually sick. My spiritual fitness elevator is low enough that I have to do it. But through inventory, okay, so with the stuttering thing, the other thing that I started doing that they had me do was carry around a little pocket journal. And every time I ordered a coffee or I talked to somebody or whatever, afterwards I'd whip out my little pocket journal and I would grade myself on how I did at living up to my ideals. So I had ideals of don't avoid words, don't substitute words, don't run into the corner when the phone rings, don't run from it, and other things like stutter on purpose and do things that were part of the recovery from stuttering. And even though I couldn't do it at the time, and I would go up and I would, say, I would have in my head, I'm going to go to the market later and get some milk. But mid-sentence, I'd get so scared that I'd go, I'm going to go to the store and get something to drink. Like just like that. And could not stop it, could not do anything else. I'm terrified. It just comes out and I'm like, ugh. And then I leave. So what I started doing is after that, I'd pull out my little pocket journal and go, lame that you said store instead of market. and lame that you said get something to drink instead of milk, right? And they told me in this stuttering help stuff, you do that enough times and it'll make it real and you'll stop doing it. And so eventually, after, 50, 75 times or something, right? Eventually, mid-sentence, I go, I'm going to go to the door! And it's horrible. I feel like I didn't want to shoot myself right there, right? I'm just like, fuck. But afterwards, I'm like, yeah! You said store! That's been my spiritual journey. It's the same thing. That same principle. That's the golden key. That's the golden fucking key. The whole deal. And that's what AA gives me. It gives me this wonderful set of tools to grow spiritually, right? I have to because I'm an alcoholic, and if I don't grow spiritually, I'm going to pick up a drink. But also, like many alcoholics, I'm a grateful alcoholic. Because I would have never done this if I didn't absolutely have to. And I do still absolutely have to. It's not virtue, it's necessity. But I get this wonderful, just Lord of the Rings fucking journey of just like, it's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. I mean, I just sit there and so today I'm caretaking at this place, 60 acres out in the woods, and there's no one around. It's totally private and just peaceful. And I, make myself some good coffee in the morning and have some steel-cut oatmeal and go sit out in the sun. And I'm just, thinking about stuff. And then once the sun came out, I went and started getting all the stuff out of the barn to move into the sauna, because I'm converting the sauna into a recording studio, because I'm going to record an album of all these songs that I've written over the last 30 fucking years. And like really try to do it right and like give honor to these songs the way that they were. And it's just a really cool thing. And so I'm just like like I don't need to call anybody or get some help from anybody or go fix myself in any way. I'm just trying to do the North Star. Like, I wish I could remember a lot of the little things but just like I'll go, well, I'm kind of hungry. And I'll go, well, what do I have to eat? Well, I have this and that. And I'll like pause and I'll go, okay, well, and I'll kind of like get in touch with my spirit and go, do you want ham and cheese? No. Well, you have those chicken nuggets. That sounds pretty good, right? Like, I just do that all day. It's like my spirit is up there with an Xbox controller trying to control me, trying to get me... Oh, have you guys seen the new Jumanji? That's another fucking spiritual giant there, right? It's so great. Because the guy, the first guy who got sucked into the video game, he's been there for like 30 years and he doesn't even know it because he used up all his lives and he only had one life left, and he just started hiding in a hut because he was so scared, he was going to lose his one. So they're characters in this video game, right? So my spirit's up there trying to control me and like trying to get me to say market instead of store, and trying to get me to not make fun of her shoes, and trying to get me to go make those amends that I've been putting off, and trying to, right? Just constantly. My conscience is the conscious contact. And so my take on it, I think that, I know that God loves me because I am God. Not me, not this flesh, not this. But I think God sends out all these little satellites that are him too, and that's my spirit. That's the guy who's up there trying to control me. And that's why it is a personal, loving God. That little piece of God knows me really well and knows that I want to do the right thing, and that I want to love, and that I want to serve, and that I want to come home. And it's not a punishing or an evil or mean God. It's me, so it's my friend. It understands me, right? So, wow. I had the intention of going through all the steps. But, that's what's so cool about this is that I have like I said, I would be thinking of things to say over the last few weeks, and then would get tricked again and again, and like be like, yeah, like imagining myself saying it, like, oh yeah, and then I call it giving myself the willies. Have you guys ever seen the movie or read the book Death of a Salesman? Yeah. There's a character in there named Willie Loman, and he's constantly like, oh man, just as soon as this happens, it's going to be so great. Once you get that job, we're going to go move down by the river and have so much fun. It's going to be wonderful. He's just constantly like in fantasy land in the future. And so when that voice tricks me and says, oh yeah, well then when I was 14, and then I'll catch it and I'll go, no, Willie. All right, Willie. No thanks, Willie. I was doing that until real recently, and then I go, I should probably stop doing that. Like, I should probably stop, like, talking to another voice. Like, that's probably not the best idea long term, So I stopped, and so now I just go, no, I will stop doing that now. Anyway, and so, so I had kind of things would come into my head and this and that, but I knew once I was up here, there was a great banner as I was pulling into the parking lot. It said, God is speaking. Pretty cool, right? And I get a front row seat to that. Because I don't know what's like. That's why I'm okay, is because I'm fucking helping. I'm trying to help so many people, and I'm trying to follow that North Star, and I have all these sponsees, and I pick up the phone every fucking time it rings, and I always say yes, and I always try and do the right thing, not because I'm a great guy, not because of virtue, but because I'm sick of pain, I'm sick of hurting, I'm sick of the shit, and I want to come home. And because of that, that power has to flow through me to help them, and I get the benefit of association with it. It rubs off on me, and I'm, serene and safe. And by the way, I go to one meeting a week consistently, sometimes a couple more if I go into the jail or something. I don't have a sponsor currently. I did up until a few weeks ago. She's pissed at me right now. We may make up, probably will make up again. And I'm wonderful. I feel great. My big litmus test is, how's that working for you? Right? It's working really good. So I don't need to go to a shit ton of meetings. I don't need to do anything other than what I'm doing. I would encourage you all to find your own conscience, your own spirit, and try and do what your spirit tells you. I had a lot of relationships in my first year. Nowhere in the big book does it say no relationships in the first year. It actually says the exact opposite of that, which is mind your own fucking business. Because I've got my spirit and you've got yours, and I can't tell your spirit what's right and wrong. Anyway, lots of stuff like that. I thought of a lot of other stuff, like I'm going to say this, once I have the power. But I guess I won't. I think just really, I want to say thank you to, the versions of you that were in that. I said versions, not virgins. The versions of you that were in that room that I walked into 25 years ago, totally lost and totally fucked, and who were there for me and gave me a big book and said, pay us later or buy a newcomer one or something, and who didn't judge me and didn't kick me out, even though I got into a fight in the 202 Club. There was a guy who had been fucking with me for months, and I thought I was being spiritual and like, I'm going to be spiritual, but he was like 6'4", 280 pounds or something, and he just kept on and kept on and kept on. And so I I had two sponsors at the time. One was Ed Kirsty. He's passed away, so I can tell you that now. He had 40-something years, and I was working with this other guy, Mark, who was a big book thumper. And I called Mark first, and I told him the whole story, and I was like, and I'm just trying to do the right thing, and I'm doing inventory, and he goes, kick his ass. I go, oh. So then I called Ed, the guy with 40-something years, this sweet old guy, and I told him the whole story. And so I'm just praying, and I'm just trying to see what is my next indicated thing. He goes, kick his ass! And so Mark loaned me this movie, some like cowboy western, like, you know, all his neighbors have been picking on him. I don't remember the name of the movie, and then it's like from the 60s or something. And then eventually he rises up and kills them all or something. And anyway, and I walked in that night and he said something, and I go, you say one more thing, I'm going to kick your fucking ass. And he goes, all right, well, you know, and I kicked his fucking ass, man. Thank you. Because he deserved it. He needed his ass kicked, and I was the one that needed to kick it. So there are a lot of hard and fast rules with stuff outside of the big book. And so my point there with all that is find your own spirit, find your own conscience. And sometimes that spirit is going to have you stand up in a room full of 50 people and tell them all they're full of shit, and it's going to be the right thing. You know, this isn't self-help. This isn't group therapy. Not for the real alcoholic. If you're not a real alcoholic, go ahead and use it for that. That's cool. Our hats are off to you. You can just hang out with your sober friends and do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And seriously, no judgment. No, like, you need to work. No, you don't need to. Like, if you can be okay just hanging out and, you know, smoking some herb and just coming to a few meetings and cool. Like, our hats are off to you. Literally, it says that. That's what we're supposed to say. But if you're like me, you know, spiritual growth is what it's all about. And that's not something no human power can relieve my alcoholism. Every single one of you could think I'm wonderful, and it's not going to keep me sober. It's not going to protect me in those strange mental twist moments. Well, that feels about right to me. Thanks for listening.